Hello and welcome to the Virtual House Church. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and I'm excited to be joined this evening by Jake from Now You See TV. Hey, Jake, how you doing, man?
What's up? I'm doing pretty good. A little sore. Me and John just went to the gym. We're starting to want to get in shape and maybe join up with some martial arts or something. Me and
Oh,
John have been talking about that. So first, before we can jump into any kind of martial arts, we feel like we need to get in the gym and get in shape enough to be able to play around. So anyways, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Looking forward to Sukkot coming up next week, and
yeah.
uh, and been preparing for Yom Kippur coming up this weekend, and it's just been doing really good, Rob.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I know what that sore feeling is like. I've been, some of you may already know, hitting the gym. I've been paying for a personal trainer at 24 Hour Fitness. And after, I want to say about 4 months of going once or twice a week, I finally hit 225 on the bench press for 2 sets of 3, which I haven't done in 20 years. So that was, I was like, all right, game on now. I set a goal. I want to be 25 before I'm 50, and I'm 48 now. So I'm actually way ahead of schedule. I was thinking it was going to take me a lot longer than it did. So yeah, man, I'm happy for you guys hitting the gym. It always stinks in the beginning. I always hate starting, but after, if you stick with it at least a couple times a week, right about the third week or so, you're kind of like, okay, I'm back in the swing again. But before that, it's like, oh, I gotta drag myself to the gym.
Yeah. Yeah, well, hopefully, we'll overcome the hump, and be
Yeah,
able to get on to the clear cut, going a couple times a week, and yeah,
yeah.
I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm rooting for you. Go for it. That's awesome. All right, so this weekend is Yom Kippur, and although that's not the portion we're going to do today, let me do a screen share here. Just a second. Oops, I just lost my screen. Where'd it go? Okay, hang on. And we'll go to the Virtual House Church website. Can you see the Virtual House Church website?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so for those of you who are joining us here on the Virtual House Church, first of all, welcome. Good to have you here. The website is virtualhousechurch.com. If you just go right to the homepage, there's some really cool stuff here for you guys to check out, especially if you're a first timer. This little app right here I got from 119 Ministries website. All these blue dots represent house church fellowships. And I guess in some cases it might be actually church also, but for the most part, these are people meeting in homes. So, especially if you live in the United States, there are a whole lot of blue dots all over the place for you guys to, get connected. You just click on one. Let's see what this one is here. John Meadows in Knoxville, Tennessee. Email address, phone number. And it looks like this person is looking for a study group, so they may not actually have one, or maybe just meeting together. Hey, where 2 or more are gathered, there Yahuwah is in our midst. So sometimes it's just a husband and a wife, as it gets started, and then maybe a neighbor or two, and that's how it works. But anyway, that's how this app works. You just kind of click on one, and you can get connected with people. There's a free resource right here. This is the calendar that my house church fellowship created, and I've got September pulled up here, September 29th. And this week's portion is Haazinu, which is the reading right here, Deuteronomy 32, 1 through 52. This is actually a really significant portion for me personally, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So there's that. And then, of course, this Saturday, tomorrow, is the 30th, and then we go into October. And this year, Yom Kippur, according to this calendar, I know some people are not going by this calendar, but if you are going by the crescent moon sighting, then Yom Kippur is this Sunday, and of course Sukkot coming up next Friday, a week from today. So that's exciting. There's another calendar available for you guys to check out. If you go to in the About Us section right here, you can click on the VHC store, and this is the free PDF of the calendar I just showed you, or you can get a hard copy if you'd like. And then there's this other one right here that was done by Juan Carlos Martinez, one of our listeners, regulars here on the Virtual House Church, and he's got a very nice calendar also. And let's see here. Let's get down to the 7th month. And so he's got today being Yom Kippur. So if you're going by the Zadok calendar, then today is Yom Kippur. So, yeah, I mean, we can talk about either one, either the Torah portion from Deuteronomy 32 or Yom Kippur, or both. Certainly can talk about both because we have that happening this weekend. If you go down the main menu here and scroll down to week number 53, you'll see that that is this week's Torah portion right here. Deuteronomy 32, 1 through 52, and the prophets 2 Samuel 22, 1 through 51, and in the New Testament, John 20, 26 through 21, 25. And all you do is just click on the link right there, and it'll take you to BibleGateway.com, and you can check out the Bible verses there. This particular portion, when I first came to Texas in December 2002, I drove down from Massachusetts down to Texas to attend a scripture-based self-help program to put myself back together again. And I figured, well, okay, it was a 3-weekend deal, and I figured I'll go to the 3rd part. And, you know, I was already broke, homeless, divorced, bankrupt, and living in a Dodge Stratus with everything I owned in it. And I figured, well, I'm going to go out to LA and go make movies. That was my plan. But every time I tried to leave the Metroplex, it was like I hit an invisible force field, and it was just miserable. Like I knew I was being withheld. I couldn't, you know, I could have physically gone forward, sure, but spiritually I was feeling like, nope, I can't go past Fort Worth. I can't go further west than that. And I was crying out to God. I'm like, okay, I feel like I can hear you, and I know what you're trying to say to me, that you want me here. And, you know, living in a car, it's not exactly a prayer closet. At least it wasn't for me. I needed to get someplace a lot more comfortable. And frankly, I like to connect with God in nature. So I was trying to figure out, well, where can I go that I could just get alone and pray and try to figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life. And so I went to a convenience store, and I bought a map, and just kind of with the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I found a place called Lake Lewisville, which I now live pretty close to. And it looked like a nice looking reservoir kind of place that I could go. And so I drove there, and I was just crying out to God, what am I doing here? This is a desert, man. I'm like, this place, I mean, they barely even have trees here. I grew up in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. I'm used to, you know, lots of trees and mountains, and it's not like that in Dallas. It's city, it's concrete, hardly any trees. At least that was my perception. I'm like, this place, and it was hot. Oh man, it was hot. Even in December. And I was like, and so I was crying out to God, what do you want from me? And I kid you not, I had my Bible on my picnic table bench that I was sitting at the lake, and it literally blew open. Whew, and it opened up right to this Torah portion right here, to Deuteronomy chapter 32. And my eyes went directly to verse 10. And this is a different translation here. What is this? NRSV. I want to say I had the New Living Translation that I was looking at the time. There we go. And this is what I saw. And he found them in a desert land, an empty, howling wasteland. He surrounded them and watched over them. He guarded them as he would guard his own eyes. And King James, I have a parallel Bible. It's a New Living and King James side by side. And where'd it go? Yeah. It was like God was speaking to me directly with this verse. I mean, literally, it's, you know, Bible roulette. You know, the Bible just blows open, your eyes go right to a verse, and boom. And I had just said, this place is a desert. What the heck am I doing here? And it says he surrounded them in the desert wasteland, and he cared for them as his most prized possession, you know, as the apple of his eye. And I was like, wow, okay, God. And then last year, when we did this Torah portion, I had just got a phone call literally right before going on the air that my uncle had taken a turn for the worse in his health, and he was in the hospital and didn't have much longer to live. And I literally just got the phone call from my mom right before going live. I did everything I could to hold it together. And John is like, dude, what's going on, man? You know, he could sense it. He knew something was going on. And that's when I just kind of lost it, because it was my uncle who paid for me to go to that scripture-based self-help program. He's the one that flew me down for parts 1 and 2. He paid for 1, 2, and 3. And it was because of him. I mean, basically, this verse, this Torah portion was used to keep me in Texas. My uncle was used to bring me down here and put me back together again. And to whatever degree I've had any kind of impact on anybody's life, it's because of this Torah portion and because of my uncle. And wow, that this time last year, it was hard to do that episode. And those of you who've seen it, you know, you can probably relate if you ever lost somebody. And John was going through some difficult time as well, I think with his nephew or something. So it was a rough time for both of us, but at the same time, it was a time of rejoicing. You know, there was sorrow, there was loss, but there was also, wow, look what God did, you know. So this is one of those portions that actually means a lot to me on a personal level. So so there's that. And yeah, I'll just say, if you want to, well, actually, I think this is the, yeah, this is the one. that's the video right there from last year. There's some great notes you can check out here from Your Living Waters. And looks like we've got some other notes here. Wow, this is a pretty busy, wow. Lots of stuff for you guys to check out. Yeah, so this Torah portion, if you haven't done so already, go to the Virtual House Church, click on week 53. Lots of videos for you to watch, lots of notes to check out. Man, look at all this. We were pretty busy. So there you go. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think God is kind of bringing, he always brings the remnant into their desert situation, and your testimony that goes along with going into the desert and really, I mean, that's what happened to Moses. He goes into the desert. You know, you see Elijah, he's taken out into the desert, and that's what happened to you. You know, that you were taken out into the desert, and that's where God pruned you. He started to, you know, prepare you for what you were about to do. So, you know, that it's just, I think this time, especially now that we're coming up into Yom Kippur, we're gone through the 10 days of awe. You know, that's a traditional thing, but it's very interesting. It's just a time of looking inward and remembering what God has done for you, and that's just it's a great testimony to hear, you know, what your uncle did for you. I didn't know that he played such a large role in your life, and then affected your ministry and everything. So, you know, it's awesome that we're.
If it wasn't for him, I would probably be dead, and there certainly wouldn't be any Virtual House Church or anything else that I've been able to accomplish since 2003. Wow. When I think back, you know, 14 years now, that's a lot.
Wow. Hey, I saw Chad Schaefer jump in here. So Chad,
if popped in, popped out.
Yeah, if you want to come back in and hang out with us, you're welcome to. I know, you know, we're talking. Oh, there he is. What's up, Chad?
There he is.
What's up, Chad? I guess he can't hear us.
Maybe he can't hear us.
Well, anyways,
and if you go to the Virtual House Church, I want to also pop this up here. There's a whole section just on Yom Kippur right here. If you click on the Yom Kippur link.
Hold on a second. I think I'm missing headphones here.
Oh, there we go. So yeah, if you go here, there's actually, believe it or not, a Jim Staley video that hasn't been taken down. Of course, now that I say that, you know, one of these people out there might do something. Yeah, I get frustrated whenever I see one of his videos disappear, because he's had a lot of great teaching. But boy, we had a lot going on here. I think it dealt primarily with the scapegoat, because when they cast lots on the Day of Atonement, it could either come up for Yahuwah or for Azazel. Your King James says scapegoat, but actually the Hebrew there is Azazel. So I've got a lot of notes here on that, and the gates of Hades and what Yeshua said. Boy, lots of stuff going on here for that that week as well. Yep. Oh, there we go. These were all Jim Staley videos that have been taken down. Bummer. So if to whatever degree you guys want to, there's a whole lot for you guys to check out, both for this week's Torah portion as well as for Yom Kippur. And these are the, I guess, traditional readings for Yom Kippur. So busy weekend for you guys if you haven't done it before.
Hey, how's it going?
Rob? Hey, Chad.
What's up, Chad?
Jake. Hey, Rob, good to see your face, brother.
Hey, thanks, man.
You get all rested up?
Yeah, getting ready to go camping.
Right. So Yom Kippur, first thing, let's do the important stuff first. It's pretty cool. For those who are still new to the Torah portion studies, this is the time when they would go into the temple, all celebrate. This was the time that they would watch and celebrate together on the day of fasting. This is the day they would watch that scarlet ribbon turn white.
Yep.
So this was a celebration day. Of course, since it stopped doing that at the time of Yeshua, so it became a very solemn day before the destruction. They were concerned, and it was really sad. And now I was listening to Torah portions live from Israel, and I'm not going to remember the name now of the podcast. They were talking about how the people in Jerusalem are getting excited once again because they have the land. And it was just like a decade ago, I think just even a decade ago, they would all go up to the Temple Mount, and there was maybe a couple handfuls, maybe even a dozen or so people. And they are now expecting close to, I think they said 70,000 people to go up to the Temple Mount this time. So it's gone from a couple dozen. So even the Jews who are of rabbinic Judaism, even if they can't tell you what's going on, they know something is happening that's different. They're beginning to get excited again, and they are in fact looking for the temple to be built again. I mean, it's been a steady crescendo building, but if you talk to those people who are in Jerusalem, and I've talked to a few people either there or connected to people there, and it's becoming really a buzz there. So I mean, we always got to keep our eye on Jerusalem. I mean, the heartbeat of the world. But I just thought I would share that. Also, why I had the chance, for those of you who weren't at the conference or don't have any friends on Facebook, I did want to quickly announce we are still planning on starting in October. My new show, it's going to be called Disputed Lands. That's going to be me with my co-host Troy King. It's going to be on Monday nights. We're looking at about 8 or 9 o'clock Eastern time. So I can't wait to see you get there. So again, you guys are going to have another show on Now You See TV on Monday nights regularly, Disputed Lands. So I'm looking forward to that. You
beat me to the chase, Chad. I was gonna jump in there and announce your show coming up. We're really looking forward to having Chad on, guys. And if you haven't checked out his Triumphal Arch of Titus work, it's very interesting. His presentation at the conference was excellent. But definitely, I'm really looking forward to the show and seeing what you guys dive into. And it's just another regular show, kind of like the Midnight Ride. And we're really looking forward to it. I know that's a fact. Yeah, it's good. I've been asked a couple times exactly what this show is going to be about, what's going to be different. And the truth is, we're going to try to make it a little bit of something for everybody. We're going to talk to not just one side of the scripture. We're going to dive sometimes into scripture. Sometimes we'll talk about news. Sometimes we'll talk about music. We might have musicians on. We might find people who have testimonies that they want to share about how their journey to
Torah or anything like that. So it's going to be a wide variety show. There's going to be something on there for everybody. It's going to be different in that regard. So I just hope to see you guys there, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, really looking forward to it. So I have a question. Chad, you brought up kind of the topic of the temple being built in Jerusalem. And this is a question for both of you guys, I guess, is if they build a third temple, I know in our heads we're going to start going, all right, the time's getting close for, some end times events. But if you had the opportunity and the abomination of desolation hadn't happened yet, would you go and check it out? Would you go and visit it like a tourist if you have the opportunity?
I would say every believer needs to take a trip to Israel. I don't like to use the word magical, but there is something. I mean, even saying spiritual is kind of well, it's certainly spiritual, but there is just something about it. I'll tell you, as soon as you touch your feet down on that land, you are aware that, and it's such a small country. First of all, I mean, this is a very small country. So literally everywhere you go, you're standing where something biblical happened, and to actually go to various sites with your Bible and see what you've been reading about. It is profound. And one of the most profound for me was going to Caesarea Philippi. And that's where Yeshua says, hey, who do men say that I am? And, Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And he says, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood did not reveal this, but my Father in heaven. And he says all this stuff. It says, then the gates of Hades shall not prevail. Well, the gates of Hades is a physical, literal place that was right there. So when this conversation is taking place, Yeshua's talking to Peter, there's the gate of Hades, like right there.
I found out there was an arch built there as well.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
I just found that out recently.
To go to the area where David fought Goliath, and I picked up some smooth stones there, and going on the Galilee. And you're going across there. We went with some Messianic people, and they were singing praise and worship songs at night. And I don't know where the exact location was, but it's just interesting to think, wow, this could have been like where Peter got out, and walked on the water to go meet Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's all like that. And so, yeah, I think it's a great idea to go. I think every believer should go at least once.
Yeah, I would love to go there. Jake, I don't think, knowing the scripture and seeing I'm looking for that New Jerusalem. I don't think I would go there. I tell you, of all the places I would like to see is the old city that's being excavated underneath the current city. They found what they believed was King David's residence, his palace. They found a room that had several royal seals that were linked to the Solomon's time period. I think if I wanted to see anything, that's probably where I would go. Personally, I would just love to go in there and just see where David's potentially slept, or rooms that he's occupied. I mean, of course, perhaps walk, the places that Yeshua walked. We know that archaeologically speaking, many of the places that are claimed to be, this was Mary's house, or this is where Yeshua stayed.
It's all Catholic.
Yeah, they're all Catholic prescribed locations, or whatever. So it's really, you can't really hold to it. There's very few places other than the old places that they've discovered archaeological findings that really have anything to do with the Bible story, except for a few, like Sarah's and Abraham's tomb, Sarah and Abraham's tomb up in north in the Hebron, what would be the Hebron area or whatever. But those places I think would be really cool. But the old places where you really know somebody was, that gets me. I'd like to see the Gihon Spring right there. I mean, you're talking about what was probably, as the Yehuda Triangle would say, probably the very heart of Eden. and where it came out, the Garden of Eden. I mean, come on, at the very heart. I mean, that gets me going just thinking about it.
You know,
Zero.
I can definitely echo what you guys are saying. I want to go to Israel so bad and just hike around, you know, just to see the places. From the testimony of like the river winds, when they got back, they were talking about, you know, just the feelings that they got whenever they went to like the Garden of Gethsemane, or they went to different places. And I would love to go if the opportunity ever arose. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, with, you know, back to what my kind of question was, I don't know if I would go and see the temple if they built a third temple. I definitely want to go to Israel and check out Jerusalem and all that stuff. But I know that's definitely going to be an enormous tourist drawing point when they do build it, right? And you know, something that has gotten me, you know, kind of wondering about that is, if they find the Ark of the Covenant, you know, I would probably like to see it. You know, that, I mean, of course they'd put it in their new Holy of Holies, and it probably wouldn't get that opportunity. But I think it would be really cool just to see that piece of biblical history. But in Scripture, it talks about how they'll I'm going to misquote this if I try to quote directly, but it talks about how great treasure is going to come up from the earth, and no more are people going to go and be looking at the ark during the millennial kingdom. And so it's just this idea that that it's possible that they're going to find it, and to be able to see a piece of biblical history like that would be awesome. And it'd be like almost like a push and pull thing. I don't want to go to the third temple because I know there's definitely some freaky end time stuff going to happen there, but at the same time I would love to see if they found all those ancient artifacts and stuff like that. But you know, talking about,
I would be intrigued to see, you know, because supposedly the menorah and, you know, various things have been preserved. And I would be intrigued just to see some of that, you know, stuff that had actually been made in the wilderness that went with the Israelites through the Exodus and whatnot. That would be something I would definitely be intrigued by. But this temple, especially if they build it on the so-called Temple Mount, man, I don't want anything to do with that thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Anyways, with this time of the feast,
if they build it in the city of David, that would be a bit more interesting.
How so? What do you think?
Well, because I believe that is the actual physical location of the temple, was in the city of David. And, you know, they don't actually have to build a stone temple. If they actually still have the tabernacle and they set that thing up, yeah, that would be, I wouldn't know what to make of that, frankly. I would be very intrigued by it. And if it was actually authenticated that this is the tabernacle in the wilderness, especially if Andy Hoy is right, and they build it, you know, if they set up a 6-story high circular dome tent with the actual, you know, things that were made in the wilderness by Bezalel, yeah, I think I would like to see that. I think I would.
Well, you're talking about the front door of the heavenly eyeball right there. I mean, you can't get any more in your face than to do something there, which is, in my opinion, why it's always gone the other way. I mean, the angelic hosts and rebellion and men, they all know that there are things that they can get others to do to bear that punishment, but for they themselves to do something that crosses that line, I think they know that before they do that, they better be ready, because it's on. I mean, you're setting it up right in his face. That takes, you would have to think you're ready or you got something before you did anything like that.
Yeah, you know, I interviewed Brian Godawa on my show Wednesday night, and he's a preterist. But he would say he's a partial preterist, and that was just part one of what may turn into a multi-part series. I have never, I mean, I'm aware of the preterist view. I've certainly read quite a bit of it, but I've always read it from my side of the fence. From especially in the dispensation preacher rapture days. I've read about preterism from the perspective of the futurist, saying why everything's wrong with it, and I have not bought into it. But he did bring up some interesting things, and I want to entertain this conversation. I want to go deeper. I want to see, where he goes with it. But to me, golly, I mean, I could have a million yeah buts just based on our mutual research alone, never mind a whole lot of other questions that would come up. Now, I have stated that I believe we've got quite a bit more time, and I still believe that. At the end of the show, I was like, okay, I mean, do you think this is winding down, or what do you think? And I got the impression, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I got the impression he believes we've got quite a bit more time, but he still believes that there is going to come a termination. And it seems to me he believes that there's still a second coming. So, I want to hear more about what he has to say. I want to look into it more.
Yeah, I didn't get to listen to all that show. I saw that you put it up, and then I don't know, something must have happened. Wrong one got up or whatever. So I only got to listen to part of his, and I heard him on, I think he was on Canary Cry or something.
Yeah.
He talked about that. There's a lot of verses. The principal thing that it irritates me with the preterist view is that they always lump Matthew, Luke, and Mark verses all as speaking the same thing, because they look very similar, but they're not. Matthew and Mark are talking about that which was getting ready to come upon him, but Luke is the one who talks. He's talking about directly
bigger stuff,
the events that Daniel spoke about. He is speaking directly to those, whereas Matthew and Mark were the generality of what's getting ready to take place. And so,
like I said to him, especially, actually both Matthew 24 and Luke 21. I mean, you could go line by line and associate it with 70 AD and say, yep. And you get to a point where you're like, nope.
My biggest thing is that, again, those who have heard me talk to you or anybody else, the biggest problem I have with any of these guys is they don't look to where the prophecy was made about what was going to take place at that time, at the end of Deuteronomy. I mean, if you lose the whole context of the conversation, I mean, you're a Boy Scout, dead reckoning, right? How to do dead reckoning in a forest. You look at the tree behind you, you look at two trees, and then you look at one point in the distance that lines up with those. Then you go to the next one, and then you look back and see if those two are aligned. Then you pick, you just keep doing that. That's called dead reckoning. Only way you can get out of a forest if you can't see the sky. Yeah. You have to have it. Well, everybody and their brother starts in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Daniel. They have two trees. They have no point in the past. You can pick anything and say you're going in a straight line. Yeah, you're going in a straight line, but you're not going to get where you're headed or where Yah had intended it for us to go. You have to look at the verses that talk about it all to begin with. If you don't have them, you totally miss the point. In my,
this ties really nicely into a question that Kelvin asked in the chat, and he's asking, and Chad, feel free to answer this as well, but he asked Rob, do you believe in double fulfillment of biblical prophecy, meaning that prophecy can be fulfilled more than once?
Yeah, I do. And that's what intrigues me about the preterist view is, anybody that's heard my Babylon Rising talk regarding Revelation 17, the 5 that have fallen, the one that now is, and one will come and his reign will be short. And I still believe that, the Nimrod and, that whole deal. But this is the first time I heard a preterist give a different view on it. I'm sure they have always had a different view. I just never gave them the time to listen to them. But Brian said, well, now look, if John wrote, I don't believe John wrote it pre 70 AD. I believe I've heard the arguments for a before the destruction as well as after. To me, I think the evidence for a 90-ish AD authorship of Revelation has the most credibility to it, and so that's what I adhere to. But he was saying, he believes it was written before the destruction, and if that's the case, then the Caesar at the time that John wrote would have been Nero. And he was like, if you go back to Julius Caesar, you've got 5 Caesars that fell. 5 Caesars of Rome had ruled and reigned and fell prior to Nero. And then after Nero, I forget the guy's name, but there's this other Caesar who reigned for like a very, very, very short period of time. And then you got another one after that. So I'm like, shoot, man, that, and Nero, I'd always heard that Nero's name actually adds up to 666. And so that, so the argument was extremely compelling. And so the question is, do I believe in dual fulfillment? Yeah, absolutely. Because I'll give a prime example. When Antiochus Epiphanes came into and desecrated the temple, set up the statue of Zeus and offered up a pig during the time of the Maccabees, if you read First Maccabees, I believe it's chapter 4, it tells you point blank that what Antiochus Epiphanes did was the abomination of desolation. And yet, about 200 years later, Yeshua says in a future context, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, take off, right? So you're like, well, that already happened 200 years ago. They clearly referred to it as the abomination of desolation, believed it was the abomination of desolation. I don't know if they believed it was I would imagine, because the phrase comes from Daniel, that they must have thought at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes that this is the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy. And I could certainly see that it would be. And yet Yeshua said, well, yeah, it's going to happen again. And so the preterists would say, yeah, it did under Titus. The futurists will say, well, yeah, but it's going to happen again. So I definitely see layers and multiple fulfillments for sure.
Dr. Michael Lake, I was listening to one of his teachings just the other day, and he talked about prophecy in this way, and he used a really interesting analogy. He kind of explained it how if you were to take a rock and skip it across some water, that's how prophecy works. There's the actual fulfillment, the total fulfillment of whatever that prophecy is, but then you see like waves going out, and that's because whenever God reaches into our reality and he either speaks to a prophet and it says he does nothing but by the prophets, by telling his prophets first, then in the same way that's such a powerful thing for him to step into our reality and affect things and cause whatever his plan to come about, that it causes these ripples, because God interacting with the first heaven or whatever, and that's a big deal, and that's causes these following fulfillments of that prophecy, and it was just a great way of how he explained it, and it really got me thinking of, wow, maybe prophecy does work that way. It's that stone skips across the water, and boom, that first time the stone hits, that's a major fulfillment. And then you have these ripples that go through time as it kind of, because the Father works in cycles. And Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun, right? And so it makes total sense to me that it would be a layer upon layer fulfillment.
Well, I'm gonna answer that probably. I spent a lot of time thinking about that myself a while back in early days, and I gonna answer the question probably in a little bit different than what maybe somebody else has. And I'll start with this: Does Yah change? Does he change? And the answer is obviously no. He does not change. His laws are set in righteousness. This is the punishment for this, right? I mean, those familiar with Rob and his talking about let's take the angels, for example. You cross this line, this is your punishment. Okay, so this is the mindset. So because God's righteousness does not change, then those things which are done in antithesis or antithetical to him or against him are always in the same manner. So when we see things happen on the world stage is because the reason they're cyclical or repetitive is because God doesn't change. And so those things which are done against him always occur in the same manner. Now, as far as the timing goes, that's beyond me why it happens in time the way it does. I still don't have an answer for that. I know there's a reason and there's laws for that too, even though I understand it. But because God's righteousness doesn't change, those things that we see that come against him also do not change. And so, yes, there's always that repetition against him that we see reoccurring over and over and over again in the same manner.
Oh man, Juan in the chat, he just posted a verse from Isaiah 46:9. It goes right along with what we're talking about. And I'm just going to read it. It says, "Remember the former events of old, for I am El, and there is no one else, Elohim, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from of old that which has not yet been done, saying, my counsel does stand, and all my delight I do." And yeah, that's, I mean, you can't get around that, declaring the end from the beginning. That's,
yeah, Isaiah 46:10. Yeah, but what is interesting on the Predator's view, and this is something that I have made a passing, I read it, but you just kind of give it a passing glance, go, is the harsh reality that the people in the New Testament believe that they were in the last days. This comes up over and over and over again. Hebrews chapter 1, it's like the second verse. Paul a few times talks about, I'm in tribulation. John talks about that he is a fellow sufferer in tribulation and Revelation. Before the Revelation starts getting, it's like in chapter 1. Paul said these things happened to them to serve as examples to us upon whom the end of the age has come. So they all believe the end was, they were in it. I mean, look at Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. Peter's like, this is that spoken of by the prophet Joel. This is it. We look at it and go, well, no. I mean, maybe part of it, but he clearly believed it, and nobody gave him a hard time over it. So it is interesting to me that
I think they don't understand. They didn't understand. I think he's right. Brian's right. That they didn't think about it in the same way we did when speaking about what the end of the age meant for them. But I don't think the conclusion of what they were thinking is still accurate from that viewpoint. Mm-hmm. They knew, based on those verses in Deuteronomy, that they still had to be scattered.
Right.
That's all of what Romans 7 and through 11 were about, that they were going to be scattered. They knew the northern tribes were destroyed. They're getting told by Yeshua, by the apostles and everybody else, the rest of that Deuteronomy is getting ready to come on them. They too are going to be scattered. So when they're talking about the end of the age, it's getting ready to come, these things are spoken to us. I think they're talking about that event. They know the end of the age, the end of them being there. They're getting ready to be scattered, and they know it.
Yeah. That's Brian's point, is that the world as they knew it was clearly coming to an end.
Yeah,
not the world. Now we look at it and say, okay, what about the world as we know it?
Yeah, but it totally leaves off, the preterist view saying totally leaves off that the purpose is to regather. I mean, what they do with Ezekiel 37, I mean, you can't do anything with that.
The entire book of Hosea. These are all things that I'm storing up for part 2 and 3. Because see, what he doesn't get the Ephraim awakening. He doesn't understand what that is. Maybe has never even looked into it, or the second Exodus.
Right.
Well,
I mean, they ignore those verses. Well, they have to ignore those verses, or they try to put them into as the same as some of the Messianic congregations, Jewish Messianics do, and that Ezekiel 37 was fulfilled, and when some of them who had flew to the south and then went to Babylon and came back with them. But it totally ignores that David being on the throne, those verses you mentioned about them being in pieces.
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
That all becomes poetic.
It's poetic, and it's like you can't just switch halfway. in the text and say it went from literal to poetic in the same breath. I mean,
well, that's become an annoying buzzword.
When he was writing it down, and suddenly he's just lost his marbles or something. It's like, no.
Yeah, that's become an annoying buzzword to me. Poetic. It's like people, if the Bible doesn't agree with them, they just want to turn the whole thing into poetry. And I would say, parenthetically, bad poetry at that, because if you're going to speak in allegorical terms, using poetry or metaphor or what have you, it helps to use words that would at least put an image in your mind or the listener's mind that is even remotely similar to what you're saying. In other words, if I say, hey, he stretched out the heavens like a tent, I'm not going to think about a spinning ball hurling through the empty void of space. I'm going to think, okay, a tent is a structure set up over a flat surface. I mean, if you're going to use poetic language and use something that's going to paint an image in the listener's mind that's at least remotely similar to what you're trying to describe using allegory. And this has become a big pet peeve of mine, man, because so many people are like, oh, it's all poetic, it's all poetic. I'm like, okay, yeah, the Psalms are poetic, a few other places are poetic, but even if it is poetic, that doesn't mean it's not true. It's still truth.
With this topic and kind of talking about the preterist view versus the premillennial, amillennial, all these different topics, I've been thinking of this theory. I've been working on this theory for some time, and I want to toss it out to you guys and see what you think. But
okay,
it's
better.
Yeah. You might knock it out of the park. Just be easy on me.
All right, here we go.
It's this concept that the Book of Revelation, when we talk with people, the Book of Revelation is always kind of looked at as a far off thing or something in the future that applies to a worldwide stage. But what about the concept that the Book of Revelation is actually much more personal to the lives of each and every individual believer? The idea that every one of us, as we live and then we eventually die, that we are presented with an antichrist figure in our life personally, and that we could either be the bride, be the people making themselves ready with the testimony of Yeshua and keeping the commandments, or just like John wrote in 1 John, that we arise as our own antichrist in the story. And we're all playing out our own story as, our own personal book of Revelation, as it were. And this idea that, sometime in our life, we are presented with the mark of the beast. That decision of choosing Yahuwah or choosing something and putting it above him. And that's the point of where you pass the point of no return, this whole idea of where you no longer repent after that one act. And that could be your personal mark of the beast. And of course, there's that parallel with the mark of the beast is on the hand and on the forehead. It's with your action, it's with your thoughts. And of course, it could be a chip. And I think, this is tying into what we were talking about of layered prophecy fulfillment. But it's this idea that, even in the time of the apostles, there were antichrists rising among them, and that, maybe we all are presented with a great tribulation, and we have to overcome. We have to do the good race. And, I don't know, but I've been really thinking about this concept that, yes, I do believe that it does apply to a worldwide stage, but also this idea that personally, if we look at the Book of Revelation as something that we're going to have to go through, each and every believer, as we come to know the Messiah, and that we're going to have to refuse that mark of the beast no matter what time it is, that it would totally change the way people kind of walk their testimony out. Because if believers come to the understanding that, hey, I need to be careful not to take my mark of the beast, whatever it may be, I have to be careful to identify an antichrist in my life that might convince me to put something above Yahuwah, to put something and replace who Yeshua is, and to kind of corrupt the message of the gospel, then it totally changes how people would look at the Book of Revelation. It totally changes, if we all are expecting to have to be presented with a mark of the beast, and we don't push it off as some future fulfillment thing that happens to a big group of people, 100 years from now, it would totally, I don't know, but it makes me kind of really, the concept, it makes me focus on my own walk and how I approach, different sins and stuff of, oh wow, I don't want to ever go past the point of no return. And maybe each of us are presented with that in our life sometime.
Well said. I think it was intentionally authored in such a way that everybody who reads it is thinking that it's going to happen in their time. Because I know I can remember my mom saying she fully believes that Christ's going to return in her lifetime. And I bet you if you keep going to your ancestors, they probably all said that, and there are different times. And I mean, people are like, oh, the world is so bad right now. Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. Sure. But okay, look at the Inquisition. You want to talk about a bad time? Or look at World War I and World War II. You want to talk about a bad time? When you think of the tens of millions of people that were horrifically killed or suffered, and literally think, our generation, we say, World War I, World War II. For us, it's movies. All right. Our only frame of mind for World War I and World War II is, the movies we've seen on TV about it. Our parents' generation and their generation, before the parents' generation before them, they lived through it. They experienced it. They went through that tribulation. And I mean, when you think about the whole world at war and nuclear bombs going off and holocausts and, concentration camps and all the stuff that has been going on in the past, you got to believe that the people who lived, then were thinking, this is it, and, for those in World War II, Hitler was the Antichrist, and each generation certainly has antichrists to varying degrees. We have our personal ones that we have these individuals that we deal with, and then there are the more macro, dealing with maybe on a national or even international level. But because even at the time of John, they're like, even now there are many antichrists. But there's this understanding of there's the Antichrist that's coming. And so I think that it is written certainly in a way that has kept all of us, since the time John wrote it, on our toes, watching, waiting, looking, and taking stock of our own personal walk. So I would agree with you. I think that there is a truth to that, and there is still a greater truth yet to manifest.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, we're all to be expectant. I mean, that was part of the every message that every prophet or any writer was. It was to be imminent, personal, immediate. I mean, it was always to be that expectation, that consciously aware of this battle we're in. I think, this idea that is something that we can just relax in, and not be on guard, is not something in these days that we're alive, not until that rest comes, but it's something. But I think it goes back, Jake, really what my first statement is, and maybe it's something that you can think about, or even others think about. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, so I understand what I'm contemplating. But just think about God's righteousness and his judgments. They don't change. And so each individual on a people, you look at how he dealt with Israel as a people, there's always a grace for a time, but there's always a coming judgment. It's always clearly defined exactly what that's going to be. It's on an individual scale, and it's on a personhood scale. A city is nothing but a city of people who are individuals. And, I think of those verses that come to mind. It says, and their sin has risen up before me. When you see that written in the scripture, and their sin has come up before me. It's a legal case, right? Somebody's brought it into the court. It's like, look, this is what's happened. And it's no question of what the judgment's going to be. It's already been defined for us. Like, you don't write the law after the sin has been committed, right? And the law is his righteousness. So when you talk about an individual revelation, of course it is what each of us would or should or expect to experience, because there's none of us outside of the laws that are written in the scripture for us. So it's all individual specific, but it's also people orientated too. Just like there's a law for a fine for speeding on this road, it's 40 miles an hour, but this road is 70 mile an hour. You may get a heavier fine in a school zone, right? I mean, I'm talking about man's natural laws here, but in the scripture, I see it as the same way. There's grace given for a time, but there comes a time when repentance is not going to do you any good. I mean, he's the righteous judge of that, right? I mean, when he says no more, you're cut off. There's no coming back from this. So I think, yes, individually, but I think there's also a people, just as Rob said, I'm just repeating what he said. Yes, I mean, we know that there's a set time when the end of this all wraps up, the end of this age, that's it, and we're moving on. I mean, there's always going to be something to look forward to, I think, for eternity of ages, whatever that is.
Now that we're kind of on this eschatological discussion and we're right in the midst of the fall feasts, there's a kind of a topic that I'm really curious about you guys' opinion, and it's the difference between the last trump being on the Feast of Trumpets versus the Day of Atonement, or the last trump being the last great day during Sukkot. And from what you guys have studied out, I know it's a very popular opinion that the Feast of Trumpets is when Yeshua is going to show up in the clouds. Boom, boom, that's the Feast of Trumpets. But it also, there's the parallel that the Day of the Lord is also associated with the Day of Atonement. So where do your opinions and how Yeshua is going to fulfill these fall feasts in regards to what is the last great trump, and when do you think Yeshua is going to show up on the scene? Is it going to be at the end of Sukkot? Is it going to be Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement? What are your opinions there?
Yeah, great question. Let me do a screen share here. Numbers chapter 10 has, in the last few years, caught my attention. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, make thee 2 trumpets of silver. Of a whole piece shalt thou make them, and thou shalt use them for the calling of the assembly and for the journeying of the camps. And when they shall blow them, all the assembly, we could think of the assembly as the congregation or the church, because it says, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. So this is all church language, if you will. This is the church in the wilderness that Stephen spoke of in Acts chapter 7. And if they blow but with one trumpet, then the princes which are heads of the thousands of Israel shall gather themselves unto thee. When ye blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east part shall go forward. And when you blow an alarm the second time, then the camps that lie on the south shall take their journey. They shall blow an alarm for their journeys. And when the congregation is to be gathered together, you shall blow, but you shall not sound an alarm. So, when I look at the terminology that's used really throughout this whole chapter right here, this has come to make, I've come to believe that this is what's the trumpet that's going to be used for the gathering together. This is the same terminology that Paul uses, our gathering together unto him. And Yeshua says, I'll send the angels, when he comes with a shout, with the trump of the archangel, right? And the shout, he will send his angels to gather us together from the 4 winds. Now, is this appears to be independent of a feast day, as far as I could tell. It just seems like this is a call to assembly. And you do something if you hear 1 trumpet or if you hear 2. So that's 2 would be considered the last, because there's only 2 trumpets being blown off here. So, I don't know. With regard to the feast days specifically, my feeling is that I believe he's going to return on his birthday, which I maintain is Feast of Trumpets. And that, of course, is, lots of trumpets being blown right there. And at some point there's a last trump that is being blown. Now, that would be independent of this, as I understand it. It could be wrong. I'd have to go back and look at it again. Seems independent of this Numbers 10 issue. But I believe he's coming back on his birthday, that you have what tradition has called the 10 days of awe, that's between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. Then you have the day of atonement or judgment. I believe that that's going to be the day that he pours out his wrath. The wrath is in the bowls. The bowls are poured out on Babylon. Bowls are poured out in one day. So, when we see all through the prophets a reference to the day of the Lord, I'm thinking that's the day. It's a day, a physical 24-hour day. And it's going to be a very bad day. He says, don't look forward to it. It's a day of darkness, gloom. It's scary. It's horrible. It's terrible. It's the wrath of God being poured out. Then you have 5 days between that and the beginning of Sukkot. And so for me, if there's a rapture event and it's post-trib, I am believing it's probably going to be sometime either at the Feast of Trumpets or sometime between trumpets and atonement. And that may be, let's say all the trumpets go off during Feast of Trumpets, the traditional trumpets go off there. And then maybe there's a call to assembly. There's the 2 silver trumpets. Because usually Feast of Trumpets is shofars, organic horns, taken from animal heads. Whereas this is silver horns. So, could it be that, Feast of Trumpets is, okay, let's get ourselves ready for our returning Messiah. He comes back on Feast of Trumpets, everybody's blowing their shofars, and then at some point there's the call to assembly with the silver trumpets. And then you have the judgment, because I believe we will be pulled out of here before Day of Atonement judgment, wrath of God being poured out. And then there's, a period of 5 days for whatever administrative stuff, Yahuwah wants to do. And then we begin our millennial reign of Christ, which would be signified by Feast of Tabernacles. So I'm not saying I'm right. This is just my current thinking on the subject.
Yeah, I know. It's just a really, really interesting study, at least. The whole idea of trumpets. I mean, you have the parallel with whenever the feast of Pentecost or Shavuot, the trumpets that are associated with the booming commandments coming down. There's parallels throughout Scripture with trumpets, and it's all significant. I'm curious, how does this all play into Yeshua's fulfillment of these fall feasts? And
yeah, as you were saying that, I went ahead and, oops, I just unscreen shared here. Let me go back. Wait a minute. I can't. Oh, here we go. I went back to Numbers chapter 9, and 9 is giving the feasts. Talks about Passover in the beginning verses here. There's a provision for the second Passover, which I know Steve Mutria has got a lot of interesting insights on that. So you have the second Passover given here. It's all Passover. And on the day that the tabernacle was reared up a cloud, okay, so you got the erecting of the tabernacle. Tabernacle. So this seems to take you as far as the second Passover. And at the commandment of the Lord, they rested in the tents, and at the commandment of the Lord, they journeyed. They kept the charge of the Lord and the commandment. So, I actually believe that all of the feasts are going to find fulfillment in the tribulation period. Especially, I mean, if it's 3.5 years or 7 years, either way, you're going to go through the whole feast season at least 3.5, if not 2 cycles of 3.5. I lean towards the 7-year tribulation period, primarily because it specifically says the 2 witnesses shall witness, and they have a testimony for 42 months, 3.5 years. And then it says the beast that comes up out of the bottomless pit kills them, and then it says the beast rules for 42 months. So I see clearly I see 2 42-month periods, which is where most people who believe in the 7-year get that whole idea in the first place, because it seems like the two witnesses are able to do what they do until the beast comes up out of the bottomless pit, which happens at the 5th trumpet. And so when the beast comes up out of the bottomless pit at the 5th trumpet, first order of business, one of the first things he does is kill the 2 witnesses, and then he reigns for 42 months. So either way, you've got at least 3.5 cycles of all of the feasts taking place. If it's 7 years, then you got you go through them all 7 times. So the whole deal of Feast of Tabernacles, it's all of these are to be mikrod or rehearsed, and the purpose of Sukkot is to get us used to packing up and going camping. And when you think about what happens, especially in the latter 42-month period, the woman goes into the wilderness. Well, she's gonna be camping. Out there for her 42 months. So all of that to me is preparation for a greater exodus, a second exodus, a sojourning in the wilderness, which will get us all on Yahuwah's page in order that we go into a 1,000-year camping spree, if you want to refer to it that, where we have mansions that he has prepared for us in the New Jerusalem that comes down. So if I'm looking at the context of chapter 10 in light of chapter 9, it seems to me chapter 9 really only covers the spring feast and the provision for the second Passover. And then you turn the page and the whole thing is talking about the erecting and taking down of the tabernacle. And so these trumpets are used. They're in the military, you have bugle calls, especially in the old days, and the job of the bugler was to give certain sound off in certain ways, and everybody was to know, oh, that's time to wake up, or that's time to retire the colors, or that's time to move out, or that's each sound blast has a significant meaning to it, and we as soldiers were meant to learn those and know those, so when we hear them, we know what to do. And so it makes sense to me that the last trump that is being used is a call to assemble, because that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to be gathered together to him. So I've only recently come to the opinion that the gathering together last trump that Paul's referring to is independent of the feast, though they could happen during or between the feasts. And my opinion would be the fall feast.
During our gathering for the Feast of Trumpets, when we were doing a moon, sighting the moon, I got a chance to blow a shofar. I don't own one. I've wanted to get one, but it was an awesome experience, and I found out I had way more wind than I had expected. So I'm an up and coming shofar blower, and it was just awesome. But there was this guy at the conference in Beaumont, and you guys can look it up on our on my Facebook page, or I think it might be on the Now You See TV page too. But he had 5 shofars.
What?
And 5 shofars. And he wraps them all together, and so how they're twirly, so they really fit together in a really puzzle-like way. Like they all fit together in this really cool way.
Turn them into bagpipes or what?
he blew all of these shofars together at once. It was insane. And I'm like filming this, and Zach Bauer comes out of the hotel, and he goes, "What?" And this guy, I wish I remembered his name, but he blew all of these shofars together in this just giant shofar blast of a ton of different shofars all together. And I was like, well, I feel good. just being able to blow one, and this guy, he's coming out with 5 shofars all together.
Now, did he have did he tie all the mouthpieces into one mouthpiece? I mean, I can't see how you could get all 5 in your mouth and still blow.
That is my biggest question, because no, he didn't have some special fitting he stuck on there. He didn't have he had 5 holes.
Wow.
And I guess he like put his whole mouth over all of it, or he like squished his face so that he could make the sound, but I don't even know how.
He'd have to do something crazy funky with his tongue or something. I can't do that. Now, my friend Kevin, I forget the name of there's a guy who's a famous shofar guy, and he makes them and stuff like that anyway, and he pairs shofars up with tone, so he knows the note that each shofar makes, and he creates pairs. And my friend Kevin got a pair, and he can do 2 and do it really well. I mean, and he gets those 2, and when they reach that harmonic where it literally, like, I mean, you could see how, if all the Israelites the Levites or whatever marching around Jericho went off at the same time, because it reverberates. I mean, it's like you're in this sound tunnel, like, and you could feel your head going, like you're like, yeah, with 2. I can't imagine what it was like with 5. Wow, man, that's crazy. But this year is the first year that I've never blown a shofar either. I had like a mind block to it. Like, nah, I can't do it. I mean, I'm not musically inclined. I don't know how. So I never did. I did it with my mouth. I would.
Yeah, that's what I did. I would do the little.
Yeah. I would do it, like that. But this year, Sheila and I were running late to get to there's a mountain in a park where our group meets for Yom Teruah, and they'll go up there and sight the moon and blow the shofars and stuff like that. And we were running late, and we actually got there just as the moon had already gone down, and that whole group was passing us. We're on my motorcycle, but we have a long one and a short one. We brought the short one with us on the bike, and I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. And it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Actually, at first it sounded like I was choking a cat or something, but then I finally kind of figured out how to get my lips just right, and yeah, it sounded kind of cool. So now I'm like, okay, now the little ones are different from the big ones, so I'm gonna practice with the big one now. But I've overcome my mind block on it, and I'm like, okay, I'm a shofar guy now.
I will say I think the larger shofars sound quite a bit better than the tiny ones. Not bashing anybody who's
they're deeper. It's got a deeper sound to it.
It's good. It really resonates. And then the small ones, not bashing anybody who uses a small shofar, of course, but they kind of got a really high squealy kind of thing.
It's like a Volkswagen versus an 18-wheeler.
Oh yeah. We have a comment that was coming in from the chat, and it's somebody says that it's their first time engaging in the virtual house church, at least in the chat. And they said, I'm so confused with all of these calendars and what is the correct times. Thank Yahuwah Almighty for sending Yeshua to cover our signs and provide grace while we seek to follow his commandments. How do we know the right times? And I know you mentioned earlier tonight is a Feast of Atonement or Day of Atonement for some people, and for others it would be Sunday. But what is your response to somebody who's just now getting into the chat, just now engaging? What is all this confusion, and how do we approach the calendar topic?
Yeah, this is a subject that everybody has had to deal with, and various ministries, whether you're talking 119 Ministries or Zach Bauer or Jim Staley, we've all had these questions. Now, some have decided, for the sake of unity, to use the Hillel 2 calendar. Others say no, that's all on tradition, and it's not. It's more mathematical, and it's not. So they're against that. Others are doing, based on the conjunction. Others are doing it based on the crescent, and then of course you have the Zadok calendar. That has this kind of its own set of rules. My suggestion for people who are brand new at this, and I'm not saying it because I'm biased and I think we're right. I'm saying it because we've taken the time to do a whole lot of research and to put together a calendar that's, I think, really easy to use for the virtual house church. And so if you're coming here for the virtual house church, again, I'm not claiming it's right. I'm just saying that I think it's a really good resource to get you started, is to use the calendar on our main page there. If you go to virtualhousechurch.com and scroll down, I'll just go ahead and screen share again for everybody. If you go to virtualhousechurch.com, you'll end up on the homepage. Just scroll down, and this menu is on every page. So, and you just click on that right there. It's Kevin and Amanda. They're our home group fellowship leaders. They put this together, and it was based on our group's effort of research, as well as Kevin's own research and Amanda's as well. And so they took a lot of time to actually explain a lot here. What are the appointed times? What's it all about? So at the beginning of the calendar, it's not just a calendar with numbers on it. This calendar's got a lot of information on it. You can read through all of it. I mean, look at all that text before you even get into the beginning of it. And then, she found some nice pictures, put the readings up so you have the weekly Torah portion so you know what to read there. So, and it's all laid out, I think, in a very user-friendly way for you to understand what begins at what time and whatnot. My suggestion, and I'm only saying this because it worked for us, would be to use this resource if you're brand new to it. And with all of the calendars, you're not going to know which one's right until you walk them out and pray a lot, and really, and I've said it before, I'm not your teacher. Don't rely on me. Do your own research. We're providing tools and resources as we can, but let the Holy Spirit be your teacher. If you get this resource and you pray about it and the Holy Spirit says, no, this isn't right, then, and we provided another resource because we have, a regular listener to our broadcast, Juan, who has taken the time to, look at the Zadok calendar, and we, Jacob Zaremba, and, there are others doing it. And they took what, they understand from the Dead Sea Scrolls and whatnot, and what the Zadok priesthood was doing, and they put together this resource. So, yes, they are different. And it can be confusing. You say, well, we're all used to one calendar. We got a Gregorian calendar. Everybody uses it, no problem. And you come into this movement, and you're like, well, you got crescent moon, you got conjunction, you got, it's not the moon at all. You got counting the barley, and, all this stuff. It is confusing because it's brand new. So my suggestion would be, pick one, whether it's the Zadok calendar or this one, and pray about it and let the Holy Spirit be your guide. Now, with all the resources that are here, it can help you. And there are a lot of people out there. I would say there's probably fewer people doing the Zadok calendar right now, even though there's a growing number of people doing it. At least in the circles that I run in the conferences and stuff that I attend, I would say probably the majority is doing this calendar. So you're only going to be off by a few days in most cases. Like, in our case right now, we've got Yom Kippur happening on Sunday, and on the Zadok calendar, it's happening today. So, just a few days off. So I know it can seem really confusing, but you don't need to let it overwhelm you. Just make a decision. We've got two possibilities for you to choose from here, and read and Juan's also done a really good job of explaining stuff in here, and he's certainly available if you want to talk to him and get more, and Jacob and others, their take on it. But pick one, pray about it, and then walk it out. I mean, that's about the only way you can really make a decision, is to actually do it and say, okay, does this work or doesn't it work? And go from there. But my position is on this, I don't think any of us have it all right. Frankly, I really don't. All of us are doing the best we can with the information that we have, and we've made certain decisions, and we're trying to walk those decisions out as best we can. But it is my opinion that we are still in the diaspora, and that we are not going to have it 100% right, probably until the two witnesses show up. And I'm of the belief that because Scripture says in multiple places, it says in many places, you need 2 to 3 witnesses to establish truth, that one of the functions of the 2 witnesses is to establish the truth for us and to get us all on the right calendar, on the right page. So, if the Zadok guys are right and the 2 witnesses show up, they're going to say, hey, well done, you guys got it right. Everybody else, this is the truth. Or if it's the other way, it may go that way. So for me, I'm just doing the best I can with the information I have, and I'm waiting for the 2 witnesses to show up and give us the final confirmation of what is the truth.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm looking forward to, is the 2 witnesses. Is everybody talks about all the different things that are going to be going on in the Great Tribulation or in the last days, but really 2 witnesses, people who are fires coming out of their mouth, pretty much in fairly constant communication with God. I want to hear what they have to say.
For sure.
And especially to believers as a whole, across the whole world. The whole world wonders at, whenever they die in the streets, the whole world celebrates. Well, I'm going to be the person, whenever they show up on the scene, I want to hear what they say. I'm not going to be celebrating when they die. I'm going to be listening to what they say. And I just, it's, some people have said that whenever they show up, everybody's kind of in wavering lines, and they get on the scene, and boom, we all line up, and that's an exciting thing. I can't wait.
Yep.
Well, with tonight or even tomorrow, depending on I guess which you study out and decide to keep, we are in the time of Yom Kippur, and maybe you could share a little bit about Yom Kippur and the things associated with this day. Paul calls it the day of the fast. It's a day to afflict yourselves. So, what is the process of a believer who's not practiced the feast before, and they might want to participate in the Day of Atonement, in the Yom Kippur? What is the purpose of this day? What is some things that somebody would go through in order to participate? What is it? What's the deal with this appointed time?
Absolutely. Yeah, great. Well, I would say the go-to place for any and all of the feasts is, especially if you're just starting out, is Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23 is where we have the instructions on what we're supposed to do and when. And you scroll down to 7th month. Okay, so right here, beginning in verse 23. And Yahuwah spoke unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall you have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing trumpets, and holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein, but you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. So that's the instruction for Feast of Trumpets. We talked about this last week. I believe that, there is no more temple. There is no Levitical priesthood. It has been set aside for the order of Melchizedek. The Yeshua is our high priest right now. He did one final sacrifice for us. So that, offerings made by fire, I would say we don't need to do right now. Again, don't believe me. I am not your teacher. I'm just giving my opinion. My understanding of this is that, based on the book of Hebrews and other scriptures, especially in the New Testament, that is no longer applicable to me. So the offering part, other than what Bill Schneblin said was, when you fast, your body begins to burn fat. So it starts to burn a burnt offering fat, and it's the fat that, if you go through and read about the offerings and stuff, that it was a sweet savor unto Yahuwah. So the act of fasting, if we are now the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we're in the order of Melchizedek, so we don't have a stone temple with the Levitical priesthood where offerings are made physically. This is something going on inside of us now. Then our burnt offering could be through fasting. If your fat starts to get burnt. But other than that, Feast of Trumpet is like, look, get together with your friends and family and blow shofars. It's a memorial. I mean, that's pretty easy. Okay, so we already did that last week. And then verse 26, and Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, also on the 10th day of this 7th month, and it's not 10th as in the Gregorian calendar. Some people are looking at the calendar go, well, it's the 29th. No, according to the calendar that I showed you that our group is working off of, the calendar that we go by begins with the sighting of the crescent moon. The Zadok calendar is different. There are other calendars out there. So from the first sighting of the crescent moon, that's day 1. That's Tishri 1. That's the first day of the 7th month. So that's what was happening with the Feast of Trumpets. So you count to the 10th day from that sighting, and that lands you on Yom Kippur, which for our group, it's Sunday. For the Zadok calendar group, it's today. And I'm wondering, I suppose for conjunction, I don't know if it's different from the Zadok calendar or not, but usually the conjunction is within a day or two of the crescent. So there may be some people, doing it tomorrow, but whatever. Between today and Sunday, people are doing Yom Kippur. So what do we do on that day? Well, it says, on Feast of Trumpets, it's a Sabbath. So you don't do any work on Feast of Trumpets. And on the 10th day shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation, which just means get together, set yourself apart, and get together. And ye shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. So again, what is this talking about? Well, I think Bill Schneblin has the right idea. And we do have reference that, like, as you said, Jake, that Paul refers to it as the great fast, or the fast. It's understood as a day of fasting, which is certainly a form of afflicting your soul. It says, ye shall afflict your souls. What does that mean? Well, I suppose there could be different interpretations of that, but the traditional understanding of it is fasting, which, if you've never done it before and it's your first time fasting, you are definitely feeling like you're in affliction. Your body's going, hey, feed me. I'm hungry here. And since you're not feeding your body, well, then it goes into burning fat mode, which is what ends up happening here. So if you afflict your souls through fasting, you end up offering, burning fat to Yahuwah. And you shall do no work on that same day. So it's another Sabbath. It's a day you don't do any work. For it is a day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before Yahuwah your God. For whatsoever soul it be that shall not be afflicted in that same day, he shall be cut off from among his people. So it's an important day. And whatsoever soul it be that doeth any work in that same day, that same soul will I destroy from among his people. So it's pretty hardcore right there. And it says, ye shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. So you can't say, well, it's been nailed to the cross, it's been done away with. Forever in all your generations, it shall be unto you a Sabbath rest, and you shall afflict your souls in the 9th day of the month at even, and even unto even shall. Now this is one of those interesting verses. Shall celebrate your Sabbath. This goes back to some of our previous broadcasts. Does the day begin at sunset, or does the day begin at sunrise? And thanks to Juan and others, and you can go back into some of our archived videos and watch the discussion on this. I am now of the opinion that sunrise. Others still think it begins at sunset. Our calendar is set up for sunset. So if you look at our calendar, everything begins the first day of the month, and the Shabbat, for those following that calendar, Shabbat started when the sun went down. I am, me personally, this year, I'm kind of in caught between two worlds, because my group and everybody I know for the most part is doing our calendar, and we're meeting here on the virtual house church in the evening on Friday. So there's still remnants of doing that old way of thinking. Although I am now looking at this and going, this verse seems to me to be a slam dunk for the day beginning at the sunrise. So whatever the case may be, the Day of Atonement basically is a day you don't do any work, and traditionally it is understood that it is the day of fasting. And so obviously, if you're going to take the time to take off of work and to fast, it's a great time to be praying, and I believe that our sins were taken care of at the cross, but it's still a good idea to always be confessing your sins and trying to get right, get back on the straight and narrow, so to speak. So that's my understanding of the Day of Atonement, basically.
And whenever we kind of talk about this topic of fasting, I want to share my screen here and read you guys something, because a lot of people, they wonder, what is this, fasting, what's the purpose of it? But you can see on my screen here Isaiah 58. Now this is the go-to for biblical type fasting, and I'm just going to read through some of this because it's so powerful. But it's cry aloud, do not hold back, lift up your voice like a trumpet, declare to my people their transgression, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the judgment of their God. They ask me of righteous judgments, and they delight to draw near to God. Why have we fasted and you see it not? Why have we humbled ourselves and you take no knowledge of it? Behold, in the day of your fast you seek your own pleasure and oppress all your workers. Behold, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to hit with a wicked fist. Fasting like this, like yours this day, will not make your voice to be heard on high. Is such the fast that I chose, a day for a person to humble himself? Is it to bow down his head like a reed and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and to bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh? Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily. Your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear regard. And you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, Here I am. If you take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of your finger and speaking wickedness, if you pour yourselves out for the hungry and satisfy the desires of the afflicted, then shall your light rise in the darkness, and your gloom be as the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your desire in scorched places and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. And your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. If you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways or seeking your own pleasure or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Lord. And I will make you ride upon the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And guys, you can't get clearer than that. And the Day of Atonement being a Sabbath that we're supposed to keep and not do any work on it, the parallel between Day of Atonement and this guide to fasting we see in Isaiah 58 is great. And that brings up this topic of fasting that I wanted to ask you about, Rob. Is there's all these different types of fasting. I remember growing up in the Christian church, they'd be like, oh, you can fast TV for this week, or hey, why don't you fast cartoons during the afternoon, or internet during the morning. And whenever I read through Isaiah 58, it seems to me like those type of, it's good to give up things for God and to sacrifice, so you spend more time in the Word or more time praying. But it seems to me like the biblical style of a fast is complete. Is like a complete fast where you literally just cover your mouth and nothing goes in, and in a way nothing comes out, because you start to listen, you start to pray.
Mm-hmm.
But what is your opinion on fasting and I guess this idea that it's not eating, and what it seems like it's not drinking either.
Yeah, I've always understood that water is still acceptable, because people would go on a 40-day fast. You can't go 40 days without water. So it seems to me that if there's a precedent set for true fasting, that you still have to hydrate with water. And so there are people who will go on a strict fast of only water. Others will go on a juice fast. They'll just allow themselves fruit juices or whatever to get a little bit of sugar going. There's another one that uses like maple syrup and like cayenne pepper. I forget what it's called, and lemon juice and stuff. I forget what it's called, but it's an interesting cleansing concoction that's actually really good for your body. What I have done in the past is either just water or juice. I think the most that I've ever fasted was, I don't know if I made it 30 days. Seems like I did it for over a week at least. I think I got it to 2, maybe even 3. I don't remember now. It was back in 2003, and I was really pressing in. I mean, I was like, I needed breakthrough so bad, and I was so desperate for breakthrough that I was like, all right, you're either going to give me a breakthrough or I'm going to see you soon. I'm not going to eat till I get breakthrough. That was I don't know if that's right or wrong to do, but I was kind of giving an ultimatum, going, and I think there's precedents for that in the Bible, where different people were so desperate, and look at Jacob wrestling with the angel, right? And I'm not letting go until you bless me. I personally think that God is honored and pleased when we take it to that extreme. Like there's no other option. Bridges are burned. There's no going back. And so for me, I don't remember what it was specifically, because I was going through so much back at that season, but I was so desperate for a breakthrough that I'm not eating until I get it. And I got it within 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it was. But I was doing like just juices. Because some people have different problems, and a lot of it has to do with our diet. We've jacked our system up so much that, I get really shaky. I mean, I have trouble with being shaky anyway, but it's significantly worse if I don't eat. So it's like blood sugar crashes, and I feel like I'm going to pass out, So for me, I need to have something other than just waters, whether it's the maple syrup or juice, whatever. I would say if you've never done it before, maybe it's good to just try a juice fast first, see how that goes. And if you're okay with that, and now look, no matter what you do, if you're not eating food, it's going to be uncomfortable. That's sort of the point. Your body's going, hey, feed me. And you're afflicting your soul. You're saying no to the flesh, and you're trying to let your spirit take precedence over your flesh, and that's the purpose. And others will say that medically speaking, fasting is really good for you. To do it like once a month at least or something like that. Now I don't do that, but there are times when I have, but as a regular habit, I don't do it. But your body, what you can handle, and pray about it. That would be really my answer to it. I think doing the some of the other stuff is, I'm going to fast TV. I'm going to fast this. Some of that is okay. For Day of Atonement, I think it's more serious. If you're just doing any time during the rest of the year, say, I'm going to fast watching TV, or I'm going to fast doing this, or whatever your vice is, I'm going to not do it. You know, it takes 21 days to develop a habit. Probably it develops 21 days to undo a habit too, you know. So I think that there's good reason and, maybe even some precedence to fasting those specific things. But when it comes to the Day of Atonement, yeah, I think it's important to go all out as much as you can, because that's the purpose of it.
Somebody wrote in and said the type of cleansing juice that you were talking about is called the Master Cleanse, and has
That's
like
it.
lemon juice, cayenne, and maple syrup.
That's it. Yeah.
It's an interesting combination.
Yeah, actually, and it tastes pretty good, actually. I mean, at least I like it. But I have found whenever I did that I was just as alert and had just as much energy, and that's all that I did. I didn't eat any food or anything else. It was just that, and it hydrates you and everything else. So the Master's Cleanse, yeah, there you go.
In kind of my own experience with fasting, I've done a few different types of fasts, but there was a guy named Frank Harris that goes to our local fellowship, and he was telling us about his own personal experience of fasting, and he talked about how he would do a total fast, which is not eating or drinking for maybe a day or 2 days, and if you really need God, you go as long, like a maximum of like 3 days or something. And whenever he told us about that, he like really inspired me to try it. And he had scriptural backing for it. Like, for example, Nineveh, the people were like covering their mouth and they weren't eating or drinking. And I know that's a really dangerous thing medically speaking, but I just wanted to give a testimony to what I experienced whenever I tried it. Is after going a period of time without eating is hard, but drinking is really hard to do. And whenever I was kind of praying and I was coming before the Father, it was almost like every tear I cried whenever I was praying or whatever, it's like, Father, this is how badly I want you. I want you as badly as I want a drink of water right now, as badly as I want this food.
Sure.
And the process of fasting, fasting's a good thing for us because it humbles our spirit, and we come before the Father and say, the amount my flesh wants that food, or the amount my flesh wants this or that, that's how deeply I desire you. And whenever you're praying and you're seeking the Father, and that's the significance of fasting. That's why it's so important for believers to practice fasting. I'm not saying you should have to do a total fast, or find out what the Father's leading you to do, but it's so important because it humbles our spirit. It brings us to a lowly place where we're saying, God, I want you as bad as I want that giant juicy hamburger, or that I want you as bad as I want that whatever. And that's why I think it's really important, and it's something that definitely, at least for the Day of Atonement, and even regularly, believers should be trying to implement. It's a good thing. And we're joined by Juan Carlos. What's up, brother?
Hello, brother. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. It's been a long time. So I was listening to the discussion about the fasting, and I adopted a few years ago fasting as part of my habits, and I used to fast frequently. So I wanted to share that based on what I have been reading in the scripture, in the Word of Yahuwah, there are different kind of fasting. For example, when you look in the fast that Daniel did in Babylon, he restrained himself not for all the food, just special food. So he did a kind of a half fast.
Yeah.
But we also find other places like Moshe, like Yahushua himself, that they were fasting a complete fast, without drink, without food, and so on. So based on my own experience, I have been practicing both fasting basically, and for short period of time and long period of time. My recommendation for people that want to practice fasting, especially during Yom Kippur, on different days, is that they need to start very slow. because the fasting is not easy. It's better to start with a medium fast, then for, I don't know, 1 day, then start increasing for a couple of days, then try a complete fasting, because the body needs to get used to fast. Actually, the amazing things that when we practice fasting is that, as you said, Jake, and you also, Rob, our bodies start feeling very weak. But what you start feeling internally in the ruach, in the spirit, is that you feel stronger. And I think my camera is not working, but you can listen to me. And this is exactly what Shaul Paul is saying. I don't remember in one of the letters that he said, when I feel weak, I feel more stronger. So it's exactly what is happening when we practice fasting. So I think it's very important, and also for people that want to practice this, it's just a suggestion. Start very slow in order to get used to how to do it.
Yep. You definitely do learn, because if you've never done it before, it can be difficult, and so you're like, oh God, help me, so you find yourself just kind of automatically in a state of prayer. Like, help me get through this, but it is for sure a time to press in.
Now, both of you guys have practiced fasting, and this is something that very likely a lot of people will go through, but whenever you start a fast and you prematurely end it, do you guys have any testimonies about trying to do a fast and losing it, and what encouragement can you give to people who might have tried to fast and they just utterly failed? Because I know I've gone through it. What experiences have you guys had with that?
Yeah, I think it's important to set realistic goals. Don't go, this is my first time out, I'm going for a week. I'm going 21 days, or 40. That's what it was. I did 21 days. Pretty sure when I did it, but I had already built up to it. It's like, okay. And for me, first 3 days are rough. Anytime I've ever done it, first 3 days, whew, but like on the fourth day, like something happens. I think by then your body's figured out what it's going to use for fuel, and it's doing so. And so, it is actually eating away at the stuff that it put in reserves, and I started feeling good. When I remember doing the longest fast I ever did, I remember the first 3 days or so were really rough, but right around day 4, it was smooth sailing almost right to the end. So it's getting over that initial hump. So look, set realistic goals. I mean, Day of Atonement, it's a day, 1 day, now that begs the question, what is a day? Does the day begin at sunset, go to the following sunset, or does it begin with sunrise and end at sunset? You're gonna have to pray about that. If you're in the camp that a day is literally just that, it's a day, then fasting for 12 hours is a whole lot easier than 24. And maybe that's the way you start off and say, okay, I'm going to try this out, see how it goes. But set realistic goals. And if you fail, look, 1 John 2 is my go-to place. It says, John says, I'm writing these things to you that you don't sin. But if you do, because the understanding is inevitably you're going to, you have an advocate. Okay, so you fell down. Get up. I wouldn't beat yourself up over it, So that would be my advice.
Jake, I have been struggling in the last few weeks to practice fasting. I have been trying, and it has been very difficult for different situations. As Rob said, I kept a Yom Kippur today based on the calendar that I have been sharing. Actually, it started last night and completed a few hours ago. And I could do it. It's a very important day. So, and the things that you feel when you fast internally, how you can feel the presence of Yahuwah internally in you, and you can have this fellowship with the Ruach HaKodesh is amazing. But as Rob said, you need to put real purposes. The purpose you're having, and the reason that you're having in order to fast is to be very strong. That's the only way that you are gonna put your focus in the goal, and you're gonna have the strength from the Ruach HaKodesh in order to move forward until the end. In my own experience, for example, when you start fasting, the more difficult you go through milestones. The most difficult day for me, at least in my experience, is the third day. When you are practicing long fasting.
That is a rough day.
The third day is very rough.
Yeah.
Then you go, if you are going beyond a week, I don't know, between the day 9, 10, or 11, that's the second milestone, and it's very tough. But after that, if you continue with the fasting for more weeks, your body start get used to the process. For sure, it's quite weird because you're gonna start feeling different things, and it's not just the need for food. Internally, you're gonna start feeling different pains or different struggling. That's why if your purpose is very strong, you're gonna be able to continue until the end. And the most important thing that you need to accompany the fasting with a lot of prayers. If you're not praying, it's not gonna help you at all.
Yeah, and on top of that, yes, certainly what you're saying is true. But it's also to be, especially like Day of Atonement, a day of no work. And so rest. And especially when you're beginning fasting, because you don't have the energy because you're not eating, you're tired anyway. Well, okay. Rest. You take that time. And you start feeling a little dizzy. Maybe you might get a headache. Your stomach is like, you're shaky, so you're not feeling like doing much anyway, but it is a good time to get caught up on your rest, let your body heal itself, let it rejuvenate, if you're not out there doing stuff, then all of your internal mechanisms can say, okay, let's go into repair mode. And let's start working on organs, and let's start purging stuff that needs to get out. So I don't think there's anything wrong at all with genuinely resting to the point of even sleeping. Like there are times where if I'm going to do a full day fast, I'm sleeping a fair amount of it. I'm going to sleep through a lot of it. And the time that I'm awake, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to pray, or whatever. But your body needs rest. That's when you are at rest and when you're sleeping, that's when your body goes into fix-it mode and restoration and purging and healing, so that's another way to get through it, is to sleep.
It's totally normal that you are going to start feeling headaches, because basically the body is starting to release all the toxins that we have internally. But this lasts for at least the first few days. And I totally agree with you, Rob. I have a secular job, so I have been practicing very long fasting for weeks and going to work. And so it's not easy at all. So that's why you need to be praying the entire day, getting the strength from the Ruach. And every time that you feel that you need to rest, is the best thing to do. You need to go to bed, rest, because you're going to recover your strength.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I know with fasting, the concept of being able to control your body's most basic urges, in a way, if you can control what you eat or what you put into your body, how much easier is it to control yourself in areas of temptation or sin? If you can control something like food, then you can definitely kind of branch out and be able to conquer other sins in your life that you might be struggling to deal with. Because if you can stop, your body's most basic urges, then, you can conquer some of those other sins that you might be struggling with in your life to overcome. And that's really what fasting, in a way, is. It's a tool that God gives us as believers to use. Thomas just wrote in, and we're going to do a giveaway tonight for people in the chat. So for those of you on YouTube, if you want to get on right now, I'm not going to wait around for you, but get on nowuctv.org, go to the virtual house church and click the fellowship chat. If you join in right now, and the first person to answer this question correctly will get a virtual house church workbook Genesis from Thomas. So we're going to do that giveaway here. And the question is this. Who is the youngest king during the times of Israel that was who was the youngest king of Israel, basically? So first person to type that into the chat, and I see will be the winner of the giveaway. So who is the youngest king of Israel?
Can I say, Jake?
Nope.
And now you can say.
I think we have a winner.
we have a winner. If you want to give the answer, Juan.
If I'm not wrong, it's Josiah.
Yes, that is correct. Josiah the king. And so the person who wins is Skiba, and you are the winner of the giveaway. So if you want to go ahead and send me your address in the chat, we'll get that giveaway sent out to you. Congratulations. Sorry for everybody else who typed in a little bit too slow. I know sometimes in the future we'll probably be doing some more giveaways, so tune in. You never know what you'll
tune in.
Anyways, I know we're getting close to the 10 o'clock hour, at least Central Time. And I wanted to make one more big announcement for anybody tuning in. The Sukkot that John Pounders, John Hall, myself, and a large group of other people are having here in Central Kentucky, there's still a lot of space left for anybody who wants to celebrate the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Sukkot, and you don't have a place yet. We still have room for you to come out and camp. I think it's like $4 or $5 a night to put out your tent, and it's open for anybody who's watching this who wants to come out and join us to keep the feasts. We're inviting you here, and if you would message me on Facebook, get in contact with me, I'll get you further information. Time's kind of running short. If you can't be there the entire week of camping, that's no problem. We will be there most of the time. I'll be there the whole time. If you wanted to come out for just a day or two or a couple and camp with us and fellowship during the Feast of Sukkot, you're welcome to. So please message me. I posted a post on Facebook just recently. That's pretty much it. And
all right.
Yeah. If you want to wrap up, Rob.
Yeah, it takes us right to the top of the hour. So, hey, another great episode. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Please, if you haven't done so already, do the actual study for this week. You can go through the Virtual House Church. What was that, week 53? Week number 53. Lots of notes, lots of videos, lots of cool stuff for you to check out there. And also check out the link on Yom Kippur. And for those of you doing it for the first time, congratulations. It's a good year to start.
Awesome. Well, with that, guys, thank you for tuning in to the Virtual House Church. Juan, thank you for joining in and adding to this discussion. And Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Take care. Good night.
All right.